Welcome back to India2nite. We're discussing the allegations against Mr. Chidambaram and his supposed involvement in the 2G case. Dr. Swamy, let's ask the question where the trial court's ruling on the charges leaves the so-called case against Mr. Chidambaram. At one level, the ruling says that this is a problem not to do with policy, but with the implementation of that policy. Therefore, prima facie, that suggests to me that the questions that are being asked about why Mr. Chidambaram gave up his stand in favor of an auction, and I accept that those are not your questions, those are Arun Jaitley's questions, but sticking to that, would you agree that those are now irrelevant and invalid questions?
Absolutely. They're questions. First of all, let me tell you, there's no such thing as policy being the prerogative of the government. There has to be a choice on the basis of rationality. You can't have an arbitrary choice, a malified choice.
That apart.
Yeah, so don't bring this policy question each time.
So you agree
policy is irrelevant here.
But let me just clarify one thing.
Yeah.
You began by saying that the fact that the trial court judge has said that policy is not an issue means that Arun Jaitley's questions, in your eyes, are irrelevant and invalid.
Absolutely. Arun Jaitley is half-cocked thing, you see.
Arun Jaitley is half-cocked.
Yes.
Okay. KTS Tulsi, let me put this to you. I'm going to quote from what the trial court judge said in that ruling about charges. He says, the policy is not in dispute in the instant case. The prosecution is about the subversion of the policy by the accused persons with dishonest intention. Does this therefore lead to the conclusion that Mr. Swamy agreed with, that Arun Jaitley's questions regarding why Mr. Chidambaram changed his position are irrelevant and invalid?
Well, that means that if the policy is not the question, then what's the question? Even the question of loss of 1,70,000 crore is gone out of the window. When the trial court itself says that there may be a loss of 30,000 crore, so 1,70,000 crore is out of the window. And even with regard to 30,000 crore, the trial court perhaps itself says that it's not, the question is not of loss, and the quantum of loss is immaterial.
Can I stop you?
If the quantum of loss is immaterial,
can I stop you there?
What are we talking about? Unless, according to me, there is illegal gratification involved.
That's right.
Yeah, can I stop you, Mr. Tulsi? You're actually going beyond the remit of the question I asked. You're actually questioning whether even a case of conspiracy in terms of implementation can be made if there is no loss. And that's another issue altogether. Let me come back to the question I asked. If the trial court judge in his ruling about charges says that there was nothing wrong with policy, then does that mean that Arun Jaitley's questions about Mr. Chidambaram changing his position from auction to one in favor or one accepting 2001 prices, those are invalid and irrelevant questions? Would you agree with that or not?
Absolutely. The question, if the role of Mr. Chidambaram, even according to the note of the Ministry of Finance, which is the new document according to Dr. Swamy, even according to that note, his role is confined to the policy, not the implementation of the policy.
Absolutely.
Implementation was by the telecom minister.
Absolutely. That is a very clear answer. Now, I'm going to leave you out for a moment. I'll come back to you later, Dr. Swamy. Now, there is, of course, Mr. Surabji, another element of that ruling on charges, where, in fact, the trial court says, and I'm going to quote the trial court, it may not be possible to say that pecuniary loss has been caused to the state exchequer, though it may be apparent that undue pecuniary advantage has been gained by a public servant or private person due to misuse of office or due to corrupt or illegal means. Now, going by this, where it is apparent or may be apparent that undue pecuniary advantage was conferred, doesn't that in a sense corroborate Arun Jaitley's argument?
Karan, on principle, I don't want to refer to Arun Jaitley all the time. He is not with us. I will have him with us. No use saying Arun Jaitley said this, said that. He may have his explanation. That apart. I don't think really we must read too much in the judgment to come to a definite conclusion that really helps or does not help. Chidambaram's case, Mr. Chidambaram's case will have to be decided on its own facts. Of course, the observation about policy is relevant, but when you are reading all these things you pointed out, pecuniary gain, please remember that there should be cogent evidence. We can't go on suspicion, can't go near surmise, can't go near conjecture. Otherwise no minister will be able to function. That's an important thing to remember, because you are implicating him in criminality, not in any civil action for damages or negligence. That's important, and not only Chidambaram, that applies across the board to any minister.
Okay, in which case...
In other words, we must have credible, cogent material, not mere surmise, conjecture, suspicion.
Prabhu Chawla, you're a journalist. This is a very technical issue, and secondly, it's an issue that hinges upon an interpretation of the law, which for most laymen is very difficult to do. As a journalist, give me your sense and give me a quick answer. Does the ruling about charges weaken the case or strengthen the alleged case, and I use the word alleged, against Mr. Chidambaram? A quick answer.
As a journalist, I believe in full faith in judiciary. I cannot selectively use one part of the judgment to support my hypothesis that he is right in case of Raja, but he is wrong in case of Chidambaram. I must judge the judge on what is written. He has not found any evidence against Chidambaram so far. If he finds, definitely he will pass an appropriate order. The question is, we should refrain from discussing the judgment in parts and quoting somebody else. The question, and Subramianan Swamy was another boardless minister when he was a minister.
Okay.
He took certain decisions which people may not have liked at that point of time. I don't want to quote those examples, because the minister are there to take some decisions on the part of, because Government of India business conduct rules give them certain powers. If they use those powers without any evidence, they have not been misused. I don't think we can play with any part of judgment. Judgment has been delivered by Mr. Saini on the basis of facts made available to him. I think we must leave it there.
Okay.
That we cannot discriminate with one part of the judgment, and I disagree with the second part of the judgment.
You've taken the words right out of my mouth. We must leave it there, and that is exactly where this particular episode is going to leave it. My thanks to Mr. Swamy for coming to studio. My thanks to Sonia Surabji, KTS Tulsi and Prabhu Chawla for joining me from their respective offices. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.